On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, are the Knicks truly a lock for the 3 seed?
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin Schall. I'm your Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast, and of course, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. This is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving you the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week. And be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. We also wanted to remind you that if a daily podcast isn't enough, the Locked On Knicks podcast now has a newsletter. That's right, introducing the Locked On Knicks newsletter, the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. It's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. Get writing from Alex and I, our team of national writers here at Locked On, and Josh Lloyd helping you win your fantasy basketball championship. And we also want to note that today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by Tony East, the fantastic solo host of the Locked On Pacers podcast, my good friend, to talk through this race for the 3 seed and if Indiana has an outside chance at getting it, and then run through some of the mid-tier playoff, or I shouldn't say mid-tier, I should say first round playoff matchups for the New York Knicks. Would they want to play Indiana? Would they want to play Detroit? Would they want to play Milwaukee? And what they could potentially expect from the Pacers in a series. But before we do that, I want to take care of some housekeeping notes. The New York Knicks, of course, outside of what Indiana does, they have to win some games down the stretch of this season if they want to be the 3 seed. They're obviously in quite a good position. They're up by 3 games in Indiana. They have the tiebreaker, so they're functionally up by 4, which is 12 games to play. But a substantial part of if they can actually win enough of those 12 games, based on last week, we can't take anything for granted as Knicks fans, is Jalen Brunson's rehab. And we got some good news on that front from SMY's Ian Begley. He said, quote, "I've also heard that Brunson's rehab is progressing faster than initially anticipated. That's a good sign for a Knicks team that relies heavily on its point guard and captain." So that is not something that surprises me. It seems to be the trend with Jalen Brunson. It seems to be the trend, frankly, with all those Villanova guys, that they rarely get hurt. And when they do get hurt, they're fast healers. Everyone knock on every piece of wood in your immediate vicinity as I say that, but I kind of expected Jalen Brunson back. I think at the time of the injury, I said, I think we got him with a few games left in the season. That might have even been a little bit conservative. Like, he might miss this week. And, I talk about it more later in the show, so I won't get too deep into it. Anyways, adding to that report, Begley reported that Tom Thibodeau said that Brunson's not practicing yet, but he's, quote, doing a lot of shooting, working the pool, working the bike, stuff like that. So his conditioning is pretty good, actually, which is a great sign that he can come back and play at 100%. And Begley previously reported that the Knicks have no interest in bringing Brunson back before he is 100% healthy, which seems pretty obvious to me, given where the Knicks are and how secure their position is. But it's good to know they're thinking along those lines as well. Deuce McBride update as well. We were told that he is going to be declared out, or he already has been declared out for today's game. CP the franchise over at Knicks Fan TV, shout out to them. They obviously do incredible work. He reported that Deuce McBride is likely going to miss multiple games with a groin strain. Now, this is a substantial loss for the Knicks, just in the sense that they don't have a lot of depth, period, right now. It is also a substantial loss to the Knicks defense. I'm not saying like Deuce is built to shut down someone like Marcus Smart, especially the Child's Husky version of Marcus Smart we are currently seeing out on the court. Not the body shame him. I'm sure he's in great shape. But I think he could have potentially made a difference down the stretch against the Wizards when they were getting cooked by someone like Smart, like his ability on the ball to navigate screens. And Fred Katz brought up this point on the Knicks Film School podcast, but it pushes everyone back a spot defensively. So Deuce is at the point of attack, and now Mikal is guarding the second best wing option. And especially with Mitchell Robinson being in the mix, all that seemed to be a formula for really making the Knicks defense click. One that was playing at, before last week's debacles, like a top 5, I think actually a top 3 level since the All-Star break. So defensively is a substantial loss. Offensively, you were obviously going to miss his shooting. He was starting to do a little bit better work off the dribble. Why this is not a panic moment for the New York Knicks, even after losing Jalen Brunson, is that I do think there is a obvious benefit to starting a real point guard. And with Tom Thibodeau, at least we hadn't seen it so far, there was a real question as to whether he would make that adjustment on his own if Deuce McBride was available as an option. I know people at home are saying, all right, Gavin, what are you doing? You're begging him to start Deuce. Brunson gets hurt. He starts Deuce. Now you're saying it's a good thing that he can't start Deuce anymore. My issue was not with starting Deuce. It was simply with starting Deuce at point guard, because I think we saw the obvious offensive benefits of having Payne out there and having Tyler Kolek out there, two guys who consistently are able to not only make, but create the simple pass, right? Like hit that hook pass to Karl-Anthony Towns on a pick and pop, hit him trailing in transition, spray cross court in transition to Mikal Bridges. Not that Brunson can't make that pass, not that Deuce can't make that pass. I just think Payne, and to an even greater extent, Kolek's inclination, are to constantly seek those passes out more than their own shot. And I think that helps make for a functional Knicks offense. And this is a Knicks team that is about to go up against some very good defenses this week. So I think that will be a particular boost. Hopefully they get Deuce back as soon as humanly possible, because they very obviously need his shooting and scoring, and they simply need the depth. They're running out of good players, and one more injury could send them into a tailspin where they could fall out of the 3 seed. Mitchell Robinson is questionable tonight. We should note that. Knicks are being very conservative with him, as I think they pretty clearly should be at this point. But let's get into the upcoming schedule. I'm thinking of making this a weekly thing. The final 3 weeks of the season, we'll go over the 4 games this week. Then we'll do the same thing the next 2 weeks, or at least that is my plan. But I think this is a particularly pivotal week for the New York Knicks. I'll say going in, I think, especially considering that Deuce is out, obviously Brunson's out, and maybe this is the last week that Brunson's out. I think 2-2 would be a real win this week. 1-3 would be bad, but not necessarily a disaster. But 2-2 would be solid, and then 3-1, you almost have the 3 seed locked up, I think, given the guys that you're getting back. But it is going to be hard to go 3-1. Tonight they play Dallas. The good news on Dallas is Anthony Davis played last night against the Brooklyn Nets. So you are extremely, extremely likely, I would go so far as to say near 100% certain not to see Anthony Davis unless I missed it and they already declared him out. Seems like they're not going to play him in this game, which is a big deal, because Dallas, even with no Luka Doncic, even with no Kyrie Irving, even with Quentin Grimes putting up 28 a game out of nowhere in Philly, at least over the last few weeks, Dallas is a team that can challenge the Knicks. We saw it in the first matchup of the year, where there was obviously no Kyrie, and yet their style of play defensively, how athletic and long they are across the board. Obviously, Anthony Davis, they don't have Grimes at the point of attack anymore, but Davis just makes that even better. And we saw them kill the Knicks in Dallas, despite, again, not having Luka in that game. Of course, Kyrie was great in that game. I would say Spencer Dinwiddie and pretty much the entirety of the Dallas team had like an out-of-body experience shooting the basketball in that game. So you don't expect that again. But with no Jalen Brunson, I think if AD had played, I'm as bad as Dallas has been. Like they are substantially healthier now with Dinwiddie back, with PJ back. Brandon Williams is obviously not a Kyrie replacement, but he's been putting up an efficient 16 off the bench since the All-Star break. Najee Marshall is playing far and away the best basketball of his career. Like he's been just fantastic, like a really, really high level starter, even though he comes off the bench for them since the All-Star break. So I think with Anthony Davis, I would have called this a true toss-up game. Maybe he would have even slightly favored Dallas with how bad the Knicks have been these last 3 games. But I think this is a game the Knicks very well should win at this point. And you have to hope you continue to get the best out of Payne. You have to hope Tyler Kolek doesn't have a rookie moment, because you are obviously very, very reliant on those two at this point. But again, I think a game the Knicks should probably win. Let's go to the tail end of that back-to-back against the Los Angeles Clippers. This I'm going to call a very likely loss for the Knicks. And this is not the Tom Thibodeau way. A lot of you would call this pussyfooting around, but I would limit the minutes of guys in this game, because I think unless you get off to a great start in the first quarter, this is going to be a tough one to win. The Clippers are playing about as well as anyone in the NBA. They've won 8 of their last 10, top 5 offense, top 5 defense over that stretch. And they have won 4 of the 5 matchups with the Knicks in the Brunson era. I don't know if that's a Ty Lue being able to expose Tom Thibodeau's weak points. I do think the way the roster is built is very similar to how Dallas's was built before all those trades, where there is a high level of shot making, a high level of length, and a high level of physicality. And I don't want to call those things out like, oh, that's the Knicks kryptonite. That is every team's kryptonite, right? That is generally what makes a really good NBA team. And the Clippers, when they have Kawhi Leonard on the floor for 5 years running, are generally a very, very good NBA team. And right now, they have the Kawhi Leonard of old on the floor. Kawhi in his last 5 games, 26 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 58% from the field, 57% from 3, 84% from the foul line. Things I'm looking at in this one, Cat holding up on the defensive end against Ivica Zubac, similar to Nikola Jokic in the flora. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but in the wildlife of NBA bigs, Zubac is actually like kind of an archetype that Cat generally has a pretty good amount of success against. Obviously, he's relatively good against Jokic because Jokic is not super fast sprinting to the rim. And Cat can hold up physically. Cat's a big dude, and he can kind of put his chest forward and wall up, right? Like strength is usually not the issue with Cat, and that is usually where Ivica Zubac, you saw it when they killed the Cavs, and he had like 28 points to 24 rebounds. Like he is a beast. So you're looking for Karl-Anthony Towns to hold up and hopefully hold up in such a way that he doesn't get into foul trouble. Where he would have trouble with Zubac is when he's running pick and roll with James Harden. The good news for the Knicks is, and the not so good news for the Clippers is James Harden is currently day-to-day with quad and ankle injuries picked up in their last game, I believe, against the Thunder, where they almost beat the Thunder. So we will see if he can hold his own there. And then I'm fascinated to see OG Anunoby against Kawhi Leonard. I want to see if OG can slow him down. His old mentor, of course, OG's rookie, I believe that was his rookie year in 2019, the season they won the NBA championship. So I want to see OG step up against his mentor and give him a lot of trouble. I think that will be a super fun matchup. And if Harden does play, we'll see how Mikal, given that Deuce is out, because I think Deuce could have given Harden a little bit of trouble, though the length factor is an issue. I would have been interested. I'll be very interested to see how Mikal can do. I remember him struggling a little bit in that last game against the Clippers about 2.5 weeks ago. The Bucks game. This was cool. I got to do some in-person scouting for this one. I was in attendance last night when they played the Suns. I was in the opening press conference, Doc Rivers, where the entire vibe was that I don't know how soon we're going to see Damian Lillard. It sounds like he's gotten like pretty extensive imaging on his calf injury. There was nothing like specific to report, but it did sound like Milwaukee is continuing to do imaging on his calf, which does not make me feel like he is going to be playing by Friday. Jericho Sims, unfortunately, out with surgery, I believe, on his finger. That's a shame because he's been playing really great basketball for Milwaukee since making that trade. I heard Benji Ritholtz point this out the other day, but the Knicks could have used Jericho over the stretch. Certainly someone you would want to play over Precious Achiuwa. I know Alex hates him, but with Alex off, I can share a little bit of Jericho love right now without judgment. They are a limited offensive team, though, without Damian Lillard. They've been pretty reliant on Kevin Porter Jr. and Gary Trent. I believe also Jr. to carry them down the stretch of games obviously outside of Giannis and Brook, but they've been really reliant on those guys as tertiary options. Like anyone who watched the Kings game over the weekend, those two were both like pretty essential on both the engines of the offense. You do see Giannis like slow down at times at the end of games because he's not Kevin Durant. He's not Devin Booker, who you can just give the ball to and say, great, go create a shot inside the final minute of a game. And if there was one sort of flaw in Giannis' offense, it's that. And of course, that he does not want to be fouled. Like the Suns played hack a Giannis at the end of the game pretty successfully, while Kevin Durant and Devin Booker were raining like late big shots. The Bucks were forced into a Brook Lopez turnaround baseline fadeaway on a botched ATO to end the game. I will say, this has been a series that has reversed recently for years and years and years. The Bucks own the Knicks. Of late, the Knicks have owned the Bucks, culminating in that blowout on was Christmas Day the last time they played? I think so. Where Jalen Brunson was just was almost playing AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr. out of the NBA. He was that good against them. Brunson is their kryptonite, and he is in particular their kryptonite when Damian Lillard is on the court. With Damian Lillard off the court and with Brunson off the court, this in some ways becomes a more equal matchup because Milwaukee can put more defense on the floor and the Knicks cannot attack Brook Lopez as much as they usually do. And the Bucks have responded this year with trying to hide Brook Lopez on Josh Hart. The Knicks have wisely put Josh Hart into the action, so he still has to guard Jalen Brunson pick and roll. And Brook Lopez, as he is still really good, he put like 24 on the Suns the other night. He is not really built to do that at this point in his career. I think Milwaukee will be more than happy to live with Payne or Tyler Kolek trying to attack them in pick and roll. I do wonder if that means a little more time on the ball in that game for Mikal Bridges and someone who can, on some level, I mean, Payne can do it because he's a quick trigger and he's a good shooter, but someone who can consistently punish Brook Lopez in drop defense, that'll be a key. And then I want to see how they look with OG Anunoby, and presuming Mitchell Robinson plays in that one. I think he will, because I think he'll take the Clippers, or I think he'll play against the Clippers and probably play again on Friday. You'd hope, maybe not. I want to see OG and Mitch build a wall on Giannis. We're running way long on this segment, so I'll just quickly mention Portland. Top 10 in net rating over the last 2 months. Top 5 on defense since the All-Star break. Similar model to Detroit. Everyone watched that game. We know exactly how much of a threat the Blazers are. Denny Avdija has been playing out of his mind. Scoot Henderson's finally been living up to the hype. So that is going to be a really challenging game for the New York Knicks. We'll see if they can hold up. That'll be your week on Locked On Knicks. Again, 2-2, I think would really be a win for this team. But without further ado, let's talk to Tony East about the state of the Eastern Conference race. We get into that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, hey, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop managing your wealth and you stop managing your money, and start building wealth. They offer surprising insights. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. They offer all-in-one convenience instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan out long-term goals. They offer easy collaboration, managing money with your partner smoother than ever. You can track and share personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all that stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, guys, as promised, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Tony East, the fantastic host of the Locked On Pacers podcast. We were talking way too early in the morning about the race for the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, Tony. But welcome, buddy. How are the vibes in Pacers land?
They've won 4 games in a row. They've all been completely insane games, as I'm sure many of your listeners know who are watching standings/watching scores. They've all been 3 of them they were losing with 17 seconds to go, and they won the ball. So the vibes are good because the results are good, but the games themselves are crazy, annoying. I don't even know what the right word is.
Look, you could be getting blown out by the Spurs and the Hornets, so you gotta keep perspective, Tony. Obi Toppin's dropping 35. He's in your life. He's hitting buzzer beaters. Things are good. Things are good. But let's zoom out and talk the race for the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. Knicks right now, of course, they are the 3rd seed. 44-26, missing a very key component with Jalen Brunson out at least one more week with a sprained ankle. Indiana on their tails, 41-29, 3 games back. The Knicks have the 6th hardest remaining schedule. The Pacers have the 12th hardest remaining schedule. Both teams play the Cavs 2 more times. The Knicks also have to play the Celtics, the Clippers, the Pistons, the Bucks. And they get the Mavs tonight, possibly with Anthony Davis back. Pacers have 1 more against Oklahoma City, 1 more against the Nuggets, 1 more against the Lakers, 1 more against the Wolves. And on the good side, they get the Wizards twice, Hornets once, Jazz once. I say all this to say, Tony, is this something you're talking about, thinking about? Do you think that Indiana has a realistic shot at the 3rd seed?
Yeah, for the last month of every season, I do 1 segment per week on here's the stuff in the standings to keep an eye on, whether it's playoff seeding or draft stuff. And the very first week of it, I said, we'll talk about the Knicks right now, but I don't think I'm going to be talking about the Knicks for much longer. And guess what happened that week, Evan? Jalen Brunson got hurt. And that completely flipped that thinking on its head, because at first, I mean, I'm speaking to your listeners a little bit. They all obviously know this. When New York crushed Sacramento and then got the Mikal Bridges buzzer beater in Portland, I thought, that probably just got them 3 because they snuck out 2 tough wins without him. And so I kind of like, I'll stop talking about that. And then they lost to Charlotte and San Antonio. And now it's a thing again. And so it's a really interesting race in that I still feel like it's a really tough climb for the Pacers. They don't have the tiebreaker. The Knicks can still win against lesser teams, even good teams. Beating the Kings in Portland right now isn't easy to do without Brunson, but it's obviously way harder. And their schedule is very challenging in a way that makes it plausible. So it is, I think it is a race now. The question is, I wonder this about both these teams. I'm curious about your opinion. Should either of them want it to be a race? Is the 4 seed actually better? It's kind of an interesting thing, the way the East has shaken out this year.
Yeah, I think Cleveland losing 3, is it 4 in a row now? Certainly 3 in a row.
They beat the Jazz last night, but they did not look good in that game.
Yeah, that doesn't count. They have to win their next game for the sorry, David Locke, our boss who signs our checks. Anyways, I would be on the same page that personally, I would much rather the Knicks have the 4 seed. I would not give them much of a chance against Cleveland in a series. It's been that kind of year where, like, you asked me even a month ago, I would have said, you know what, that could be a toss up. Like, I think the Knicks will play well against the Cavs. The Knicks haven't seen them with Mitchell Robinson yet. It'll be interesting to see those final 2 games. And yet, not much of a chance. There is, like, I don't know, like 25% chance. Like, I give them like sub 10%, maybe a 10% chance, but really that 10% chance is like, does Jason Tatum turn an ankle and miss the whole series? Because I don't really think they can play with Boston right now. In that sense, I would strongly prefer for them to have the 4 seed. I don't think Tom Thibodeau in any like multiverse is ever going to think that way. And if I'm Indiana, I'm pretty content staying there because I would kind of think the same thing about the Pacers, where Cleveland would be an obvious favorite. But you tell me, Tony, like, would you feel like, you know what, we have a puncher's chance against that team? Like, the talent on paper, there's not such a big gap that it's impossible that Indy could get hot for like 2 weeks and beat Cleveland.
I share your opinion that their chances of beating either Boston or Cleveland are not very high, pretty low.
Fair. Yeah.
I would say their chance. Here's what the argument for getting 3 would be is you think beating Detroit, or anyone thinks beating Detroit is, if it's Detroit at 6, so much easier than beating Indiana or Milwaukee or whoever in the 4-5, right? That would be the argument to get 3 is even if you think it's way harder to beat Boston, you have a better chance to get to Boston. But I, like you, don't know that Detroit is so much easier than everybody. I think they're probably the easiest of the top 6 teams, but not so much easier than anyone else that you're willing to give up that conference finals equity in the second round. And I feel bad for the Cavs every time I talk like this. Like, their record is insane. Like, they just steamroll everybody. They are playing not great right this second. But I also think, I mean, we just saw it happen, that Boston is a more formidable playoff opponent. And so if you can avoid their side of the bracket, I think that's ideal. And for the Pacers specifically, who did not lose a home game until the conference finals in the playoffs last year, as the Knicks know, getting a home court advantage situation where you also avoid Boston seems like the sweet spot, even if you have to sacrifice maybe a little bit of first round equity. But that's obviously, like, you can't just pick your seed, right? Like, it's impossible to game it. And so in some ways, maybe like kind of chase 3 and see how the chips fall. Like, it's really hard because let's say you don't chase 3 with that in mind and the Bucks surge and then you're 5 all of a sudden and then you're on the road and maybe you lose. Like, it's just a really hard balance to strike. So yeah, I think we're kind of in lockstep there. It's just not easy to just see like, yeah, we picked 4, let's do that. Like, you can't just do it. It's so close.
Can you help me through this from a Knicks first round perspective? Because it's something Alex and I have discussed. I've ranked those teams probably much to your chagrin, Milwaukee, Detroit, Indy, in terms of who I'm kind of most afraid of. And I think I'm probably being too disrespectful to the Pacers, a team that obviously beat the Knicks
handled them this year
ago. And I mean, Pascal Siakam in particular, like, scares the bejesus out of me. Like, that guy is just a playoff killer. And like, I still like wake up in a cold sweat with him hitting like another mid-range jumper over anyone not named OG Anunoby when they had to guard him. But that being said, I think those 3 teams are so, I don't really know how to sort those 3 teams out in my head. Like, Giannis is obviously the best player on any of those teams. And like that, like, just the idea that he could put up 50 for, again, 2 weeks and knock you out is terrifying. I think Detroit, frankly, has been the best of the 3, like the last 40 games or so. And I don't know if that's a particularly controversial statement. I don't know if they're still first. As of a week ago, they had like the best defense in the NBA. over their last 10 games or so. Obviously, I kind of think Cade Cunningham is a monster. He might be, this is an insult to Tyrese Haliburton a little bit, but he might be second for me in that like best player conversation. Like young, hungry. I'm just wondering, like, does it all translate right away? And does their shooting issues like, does that make it a little harder for them to come playoff time versus a team like Indiana that is absolutely not a question for? So I'm curious if you were wearing a Knicks hat right now and yelling bing bong into your microphone, how would you like rank those three opponents for the Knicks and like who they should want to play?
Yeah, I don't without knowing specifically their individual results against those teams. They play the Bucks this week, I believe, which will be potentially telling as well.
The Knicks have killed the Bucks. They're 1-2 against Detroit, and you've seen the Indy games.
And they handled the Pacers in MSG. I mean, the Pacers shot awful. I think that was like their worst 3-point percentage game in like 5 years or something.
There's so many open ones too that just weren't going in. But yeah.
But the Pacers win over New York in November was like that would be their vision for that series, because that game Mathurin and Haliburton and Turner were all cooking and Siakam was pretty good. And then in February, the Knicks just came back in and said, nope, we're better here. Stay away. And so that is a challenging matchup for the Pacers. They have a lot of guys who I would consider pace control guys. Like the Pacers want to run and play fast. And like a lot of times when they're not playing well, they bring in Quentin Jackson or Obi Toppin, and those guys juice up the game, and all of a sudden it turns and they can play their style a little bit better. The Knicks have a lot of guys who don't want to speed it up. They want to bring it to a Knicks pace, and they can do that either because they're really good on defense, whether that's switching or guarding their yard or whatever, or they can give it to Jalen Brunson, who can handle the ball for a long time and still make successful plays regardless of a shot clock situation. I'm not saying the Knicks are like a slow-paced team, but just they can control the tempo of a game in a way that I don't know if what are they in pace, like 22nd or something? They can control the tempo of a game in a way that really hurts the Pacers, makes it tough for them to play their way. So even if they're not playing bad, they aren't playing their way against the Knicks in a way that they have had success doing against Detroit and Milwaukee. I mean, this year they're struggling with Milwaukee, but last year they crushed them a bunch. So I get what you're saying. I'm surprised about Detroit over Indiana, though. I not that Detroit isn't good. They're very good. Their defense is very solid. JB Bickerstaff's playoff resume just isn't that whelming to me. But Cade could be awesome, right? Their turnover problems and that hurdle seem like big hurdles to me, even though I agree with you that they are. I might be overlooking them a little bit, and they are very good. They just won without Cade. They just beat New Orleans without him. Like, they have a lot of solutions. They can guard. They can shoot. They have a lot of awesome role players. I think the reason I'm going to look like an idiot if they went around is because we just haven't seen it. And so it's harder for me to pick that or to gravitate to that. But I don't think your rankings are crazy, but I think a lot of Knicks people want to see the Pacers again after that series last year, too.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm overreacting to like the Knicks just being completely unable to guard Cade Cunningham in that last game, and that incled like OG Anunoby getting time on him.
He is crazy.
Yeah, he just like they did not have like any kind of chance against him. Like, and they were throwing a lot, and I do think Mikal Bridges, like he's been up and down on defense this year, but I think having him to throw at Haliburton, OG to throw at Siakam, like it makes me a little more confident, because last year just like it was, all right, who are you going to put OG on? And then like, who's going to cook you at times in that series? And I do wonder if Cat like equalizes. And I think Indiana, like maybe this should be the case for the Knicks, like being like just transparently afraid of Indiana, is that once they lost Hartenstein, like ideally they would have kept him. But I do think that Indiana series is like why they went out and got Cat, and like wanting to play at that pace, wanting to have that ceiling offensively, and saying like, hey, we can be as gritty as we want. We can be as good defensively in the playoffs as we want. Like there are going to be games where like Indiana's playing fast and like raining threes, and you are just going to have to try to outscore them. And the Knicks, after a whole bunch of injuries, couldn't quite do that a year ago. But I'm fascinated, Tony, before we sign off on this, like what you think about Indiana's ceiling in this year's playoffs. Like they are like in this type of conversation, like one of the most interesting teams in the NBA, because you could be like a glass half empty guy and say, all right, maybe if Milwaukee's healthy, like they don't get out of the first round. Maybe if New York's healthy, they don't get out of the second round. And then you can zoom out and you could say they weren't healthy in the third round. And it was only 5 games, but or maybe it was 4. I might be misremembering, but they pushed Boston last year, like more than any other team. Like they played them, I thought, like substantially better than Dallas did. And like, frankly, like not to twist the knife for Indiana fans, but like could have been a 2-0 in that series. And I've heard you talk on your pod about the fact that the defense is better this year. The offense is worse than anyone expected. That gives them a higher floor, lower ceiling. Do you not to like get too granular and spend like an hour on this, but I'm like fascinated, like why the offense isn't quite as good. And like, if that's something that Indiana could find again in the playoffs and like combine best of both worlds and maybe like make another surprise run to a conference finals.
Yeah, they could. I think they can win around, certainly. And like, it's funny that like this whole change of Pacers profile that you just described, and you're right, I still feel that way, lower ceiling, higher floor. They're still like the same win profile team. And what I mean by that is they, for some reason, stink when they play just bad teams. It's the most bizarre thing ever. They have 16 losses below 500 teams. That's more than anyone in the top 11 in the East, right? What? But they're really good when they play good teams. They have a winning record against above 500 teams. It's only them, Cleveland and Boston, who've done that in the East. Good news for the Pacers. In the playoffs, you only play good teams.
No
right?
bad teams.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no bad teams in the playoffs. So, like, if they're like, I don't know if it's a maturity thing, if it's something about the way they play, like it's 2 years running with the same roster. It's a problem, right? Obviously, they just can't get up for those games. If they can keep that being a thing where they're just like lasered in and focused, even with a different profile of defense and offense, I still think they can win around and probably would be favored to win around if they finish 4. Cleveland and Boston are really good teams. I mean, like, I don't think people realize like 57-14 is like insane. You're winning 6 out of 7 like a whole season, or 5 out of 6 like a whole season. It's crazy. Oklahoma City's about to be 60-12. That's barely better than the Cavs. Like, it's just nuts how good those teams at the top are. I don't know how you feel Knicks-wise about this. I think the Knicks have had the opposite problem where they've just mopped up bad teams but haven't gotten that signature win quite yet. Everybody thought it was going to be that Lakers game, and then just, that was sad. I wanted the Knicks to win that one. Where, the Knicks certainly would feel like they should win the first round, but might have the same hurdles of the top 2 teams might just be better, even though the Knicks obviously have a very high ceiling as well with their offense this year. So I think the Pacers feel about there, but with a lower offensive level this season, and a lot of that's that to start the season, they were just awful. They were 10-15 and Haliburton didn't look the same. But even since then, they're probably only 5th or 6th, right? If they can't get back to that level, does that impede them from winning a single round? I don't know, because their defense is better, like meaningfully better in a way that could win them a game or 2 in the postseason. They have won games because of their defense this year. That never happened last year. So having more ways to win is good. Maybe that earns them one postseason win. But I do think if they want to do what they did last year, where Joe Mazzulla saying, yeah, the Pacers series was by far our hardest series that we had in the playoffs last year, they've got to get a little bit more clicking on the offensive end before the end of the year.
Yeah, I think the Knicks are in a very similar spot. I just like sped wrote this down before coming on, but my Eastern Conference years would be Boston, Cleveland. I think the Knicks are tier 2 of their own, and then tier 3 would be Detroit, Milwaukee, Indiana. My caveat there is I think the Knicks are significantly closer to being a tier 3 team than a tier 1 team, which is kind of the opposite of what I would have said. Even like 20 games into the season, and that's it is a full like couple of podcasts of reasons why that's the case. The main one is I think this is somewhat of a flawed roster, and on top of that, Tom Thibodeau has not been able to maximize like the ingredients he's been given to cook with. The starting lineup has been remarkably mediocre over an extraordinarily large sample size that I guess is getting smaller by the day. Without Jalen Brunson, has forced him to experiment a little bit. And if the Knicks leaned into certain players, like specifically
Tyler Kolek, let's go.
Yeah, Tyler Kolek, maybe even more so Deuce McBride. But yeah, Tyler Kolek. Hey, you know what he did the other day? 7 assists, plus 15, 3 steals, no turnovers in a quarter. That is the first in NBA history. That is not cherry picking. He is just a future Hall of Famer.
Tyrese Haliburton, write that down.
Yeah. Honestly, he's like short, like shorter arms, not as good shooting. Tyrese Haliburton. I don't know where that gets you, but we'll find out. Anyways, I would say Detroit, Milwaukee, Indiana, tier 3, and then maybe Orlando, Atlanta, Chicago, just as an FU to the Miami Heat. I'm not even putting them in there, but that would kind of be where things stand. But to me, like the Knicks are like far from a sure bet to get out of the first round right now. Like, and like whether it's Indiana, whether it's Milwaukee, whether it's Detroit, I would make the Knicks solid favorites in any of those series. I think they are far from unbeatable in any of those series. And on the flip side, like I don't have to like belabor the point. I think it is a real long shot that they beat Boston. And I think Cleveland would not, maybe not miraculous, but like it would take something changing for the Knicks to beat the Cavs. Tony, maybe we finish on this. Where do you think Indiana ultimately finishes? And like in your to what we're talking about, in your perfect world, where would you want them to finish?
I think they finished 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Their schedule is getting harder now that they just had an easy week with 2 Brooklyn games and a Dallas game. But after this week, they play the Wolves, the Lakers, and the Thunder this week. They really have 2 more hard games, or maybe 3, the rest of the way. We'll see what those Cleveland games to end the year look like. Obviously, the Cavs are on the schedule, but exceedingly likely the Cavs have clinched the 1 seed by then. So we'll see what the Cavaliers, I'll put in air quotes, actually are for those games. So I think it's they'll have a lot of control over finishing above 6, I think, but getting up to 3, do they want to? How much I think you're right that Tibbs will keep pushing the gas when Brunson comes back. They'll want to integrate him, right? They probably should want to integrate him to some extent. Maybe that's just rosy Pacers want to be 4-5 thinking, but I think 4-5 in either of those seeds is their most likely finish, kind of pending Damian Lillard health, Bucks recovery, because they weren't playing that good before Dame went down anyway. So I think 4 is probably slightly the most likely and 5 is second. But if they really get on a roll, they could get to 3. And then that'll be another thing I have to talk about every day. Woohoo! More seeding permutations.
There you go. We feel.
How good is Brunson going to be when he returns? That'd be like my last 60-second question of this discussion.
You said how good will he be when he comes back?
Like if he's not 100%, that also is a big part of this.
Yeah, so I don't to the point of this whole conversation, I think the stupidest thing the Knicks could possibly do is rush him back in any way. Like obviously you want him to get a couple of games under his belt, but like that just cannot be at the risk of re-injury and like him it's much more important he's healthy for the first playoff game than in a great rhythm, because I think he's someone capable of finding that very quickly, even after a substantial layoff. We know he's out at least this week, so that'll be Dallas, the Clippers, Milwaukee, and likely a home game against Portland. And then they get the Sixers on Tuesday. I don't see any reason why you'd play him in that game. I will maybe apologize for that when Quentin Grimes drops a 50-piece on our heads in a revenge game, and then I'll have to apologize. But I would say Wednesday, April 2nd against Cleveland, and my gut instinct would be you bring him back, you play him like 18 minutes that first game, maybe 28 minutes that second game, and then full bore the third. That is my instinct. The way this will probably go is they'll bring him back and he'll play 40. And that's not me being like, oh, crazy Tom Thibodeau in his minutes. Like I think Brunson will come back and be like, no, I'm good. I'm on the court. I'm playing, and kind of insist on staying out there. I don't know if he'll win that battle. I don't know if the Knicks medical staff will win that battle, but I would say after maybe like 2 games where he's a little bit off, I think we'll get pretty close to 100% Brunson, as long as the Knicks don't rush him back, which I, again, think would be an absolutely crazy thing to do. To answer my own question, I'm on the same page as you. I'd be surprised if the Knicks fall out of the 3 seed again. Like I think it's totally doable to go 2-2 this week, even without Jalen Brunson. Whether the Knicks actually pull that off will remains to be seen. But then the finish is encouraging for me. Boston, like you don't know, they might be sitting guys for that April 8th game at Detroit. It's going to be really tough on April 10th if they're still battling. I have a feeling Cleveland's going to be sitting everyone Friday, April 11th, and then the Knicks finish at the net. So they should be able to finish 3-1, and to me that should be enough to push them over the top. But Tony East, always a pleasure, man. For everyone listening here on the Locked On Knicks side, can you tell them where they can find their great work if they want to be convinced that the Pacers are more of a threat than the Bucks or the Pistons are?
Locked On Pacers every day. If there's a Pacers Knicks series, I will go to the Big Apple again. My wallet says, please do not give me another Pacers Knicks series, but I did have a lot of fun up there. And I write in Forbes every so often about the team too.
All right, awesome. I hope everyone follows along. I know I've been eyeing them since last year. Knicks fans, they want a chance of revenge. Maybe they'll get it. Until then, he's Tony East. I'm Gavin Schall. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Pacers and Locked On Knicks.